In this episode, we're going to focus on one of the most human parts of a privacy program, which is how an organization responds when a real person asks about their personal data. Rights requests can feel technical because they involve deadlines, verification, and systems, but at their core, they are about respect and control. Someone is saying, I want to know what you have about me. I want to correct it, I want to delete it, or I want you to stop using it in a certain way. A strong privacy program responds with clear notices that explain what will happen, reliable processes that make the response consistent, and accountable outcomes that prove the organization actually did what it said it would do. Beginners sometimes imagine rights requests as rare events handled by lawyers, but in many environments they are regular operational work, and if the work is not designed well, it becomes chaotic fast. The risk is not only legal, because a sloppy response can harm trust, create confusion, and expose the organization to complaints and escalation. The good news is that rights request handling can be designed like any other reliable process, with clear intake, clear roles, clear evidence, and clear communication. By the end, you should understand what makes rights request responses defensible and respectful, even before you learn the deep details of specific laws. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at Cyber.Author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A helpful foundation is to understand that rights requests are not one single type of request, even though people often talk about them as if they are. Different privacy regimes grant different rights, but common themes include access, deletion, correction, portability, restriction, objection, and information about processing. Each request type has different complexity and different risks. An access request often requires gathering information from multiple systems and presenting it in a way the person can understand. A deletion request requires knowing where data exists and whether there are retention obligations that limit deletion. A correction request requires updating data and ensuring the update flows to places where that data is used, so the error does not reappear. A restriction or objection request requires changing how data is processed without necessarily deleting it, which can be tricky because processing is often embedded in business workflows. The privacy program's job is not to treat all of these as identical tickets. The job is to build a process that can recognize the type of request, route it correctly, and produce the right kind of response with evidence. For beginners, it helps to think of rights requests as different kinds of problems that share a common structure. Verify the person, understand the request, locate relevant data and processing, apply the correct action, and communicate clearly. Clear notices are the first pillar, and they matter more than beginners often realize because confusion is one of the biggest sources of friction and complaints. A notice in this context is the communication you give the requester about what the process will be, what information you need from them, what timelines apply, and what they can expect in the response. Clear notice begins at the intake point, because people should not have to guess where to submit a request or what to include. It also continues after the request is received, because the requester should receive confirmation and a plain language explanation of next steps. If identity verification is required, the notice should explain why, what options exist, and what happens if verification cannot be completed. If the request cannot be fulfilled in full, the notice should explain the reason in understandable terms, without hiding behind vague language. Clear notices also set expectations around scope, such as what types of data are covered, what time periods may apply, and what kinds of records may be excluded due to legal obligations. The goal is not to overwhelm people with legal text, but to reduce uncertainty and prevent surprises. When notice is clear, the requester is less likely to escalate simply because they feel ignored or confused. The second pillar is process, and process is how you ensure requests are handled consistently even when volume increases or staff change. A rights request process typically has a few essential stages, and the key is that each stage should have defined responsibilities and decision rules. Intake means capturing the request in a way that preserves the details and starts the clock for deadlines. Triage means categorizing the request type, identifying special complexity, and deciding who needs to work on it. Verification means confirming that the requester is who they claim to be, using methods that reduce fraud risk without collecting excessive new data. Data discovery means locating relevant data across systems, including structured databases, support systems, marketing systems, and records held by vendors. Fulfillment means performing the action, such as providing a copy, correcting data, deleting data, or applying a restriction. Response means communicating the outcome clearly and providing any required information about what was done. Record keeping means keeping evidence of the process so the organization can prove accountability later. Beginners sometimes want to jump straight to fulfillment, but without strong intake, verification, and discovery, fulfillment becomes error-prone and risky. A reliable process makes success repeatable, which is the real goal. Accountable outcomes are the third pillar, and they are what separate a polite response from a defensible response. Accountability means you can show what decision was made, what action was taken, and why that action was appropriate. For example, if a deletion request is partially denied because retention obligations require keeping certain records, accountability means you can point to the rule, identify what was retained, and explain it clearly. If an access request is fulfilled, accountability means you can show where the data came from, confirm the identity verification steps used, and prove that the response was sent securely to the correct person. Accountability also includes deadlines, because many rights frameworks require responses within specific time limits, and missing deadlines can create regulatory exposure even if the final answer is correct. Accountable outcomes depend on evidence, such as timestamps, verification records, system confirmations, and notes about decisions. Evidence does not need to be complicated, but it must be consistent and retrievable. Without evidence, the organization can only say "trust us," and that is weak when someone challenges the response. With evidence, the organization can demonstrate that it handled the request responsibly and consistently. Identity verification is one of the most important parts of rights request handling because it is where privacy and security meet. If you disclose personal data to the wrong person, you have created a privacy incident, even if you were trying to honor a right. Verification should be proportional, meaning the stronger the request sensitivity, the stronger the verification needs to be. For example, a request that leads to data disclosure generally requires stronger confidence than a simple request for general information. At the same time, verification should avoid collecting unnecessary new data, because asking for excessive documentation can create new risk and can feel unfair to the requester. A strong approach uses information the organization already has where possible and offers reasonable methods that do not exclude people who lack certain documents. Verification should also be consistent, because inconsistent verification creates both risk and perceptions of unfairness. The organization should record what verification method was used and whether verification was successful, because that becomes part of the accountability evidence. Beginners often think verification is a simple gate, but it is really a careful balancing act between preventing fraud and respecting individuals. When done well, it protects both the requester and the organization. Another area that beginners underestimate is data discovery, because locating a person's data is often the hardest operational part of the process. Data can be spread across many systems, and identifiers can vary, like email address in one system and account ID in another. Data discovery depends heavily on good data inventory and data mapping practices, because if the organization does not know where personal data lives, it cannot reliably fulfill rights requests. This is also where vendor relationships matter, because processors may hold relevant data and may need to assist with fulfillment. A rights request process should include a clear way to query the relevant systems and a way to coordinate with system owners who understand the data. It should also handle edge cases, like duplicate accounts, multiple identifiers, or records that are linked indirectly. Discovery should be careful about scope, because you want to collect the right data, not random data about other people or unrelated contexts. When discovery is sloppy, responses become incomplete or incorrect, which can lead to repeated requests and escalations. When discovery is strong, fulfillment becomes faster and more accurate because teams are not hunting in the dark. Fulfillment is where the organization actually acts, and the key beginner lesson is that fulfillment should be designed to avoid accidental side effects. For example, deleting data should be done in a way that respects legal retention obligations and does not break necessary records for safety, billing, or compliance. Correcting data should propagate to the places where the incorrect data is used, or else the correction may be superficial. Providing access should present the data in a clear format and avoid disclosing information that would violate other people's privacy, such as messages containing other individuals' data. Restriction or objection requests should result in actual processing changes, not just notes in a file, because the person's right is about what happens going forward. This is why rights request handling often needs coordination across teams, because the action may touch multiple workflows. Fulfillment should also include a check step, where someone verifies the action was completed correctly, especially for high-risk requests. For beginners, it helps to think of fulfillment as an operation that must be reversible in reasoning, meaning you can explain what was done and why it satisfies the request. If you cannot explain it, it probably is not well controlled. Communication with the requester is where clear notices and accountable outcomes come together, and it can make the difference between a smooth interaction and a complaint. The response should confirm what the organization understood the request to be, because misunderstandings are common. It should explain what actions were taken, what data was included or changed, and what was not done and why. If there are limitations, the explanation should be specific enough to be meaningful, but not so detailed that it creates unnecessary risk. For example, you can explain that certain records must be retained due to legal obligations without exposing internal secrets. The response should also explain any next steps available to the requester, like how to submit a correction if the provided data reveals an error, or how to appeal if they disagree. Importantly, communication should avoid sounding defensive, because rights requests are not accusations, even when they feel stressful internally. A calm, clear response shows maturity and reduces escalation risk. Beginners sometimes focus so much on meeting legal requirements that they forget the human experience, but the human experience is often what drives complaints. Clear, respectful communication is a control in itself. Record keeping is the quiet backbone of rights request handling, because it supports accountability and continuous improvement. Records should capture the timeline, the request type, the verification method, the systems consulted, the decisions made, and the actions taken. They should also capture any exceptions or unusual issues, like inability to verify, conflicts between systems, or vendor delays. Record keeping should be designed to minimize unnecessary personal data, meaning you record the evidence you need without copying more personal data into the case file than required. Records are useful not only for proving compliance, but also for learning, because patterns in records show where the process is struggling. If many requests are delayed because one system is hard to search, that is a signal to improve data mapping or system processes. If many requests are unclear, that is a signal to improve intake notices. If many requests involve the same vendor delays, that is a signal to adjust vendor obligations and monitoring. When you treat records as feedback, the program improves over time rather than repeating the same mistakes. This is how rights handling becomes sustainable. Another essential concept is handling exceptions and edge cases in rights requests, because real life does not always match the clean scenarios people imagine. Sometimes a request is abusive or repetitive, and the program must handle it fairly while protecting resources. Sometimes the requester is an authorized agent, and the program must verify authority without disclosing data improperly. Sometimes the request involves data about other people, and the program must balance competing rights. Sometimes data cannot be fully deleted because it is embedded in backups or required for legal claims, and the program must explain the limitation and apply safeguards. Sometimes the organization cannot locate certain data because identifiers are inconsistent, and the program must decide what reasonable effort means while still being honest. A mature process anticipates these cases and defines how decisions are made, rather than improvising each time. Improvisation creates inconsistency, and inconsistency creates risk. Beginners should understand that edge cases are not rare, and they are predictable enough that you can design for them. The more the program designs for edge cases, the more confident and calm it becomes. Bringing everything together, responding to rights requests well is a combination of clarity, consistency, and proof. Clear notices reduce confusion and set expectations so people understand what will happen. Strong processes make handling consistent and prevent important steps from being skipped when work is busy. Accountable outcomes ensure the organization can demonstrate what it did and why, using evidence rather than promises. Identity verification protects people from fraud and protects the organization from disclosing data to the wrong person. Data discovery ensures the response is accurate and complete, which reduces repeat requests and escalation. Fulfillment ensures that actions are real and aligned with obligations, not just symbolic. Communication ensures the requester feels respected and informed, which matters for trust and complaint reduction. Record keeping ensures the organization can defend itself and learn. For beginners, the most important shift is seeing rights request handling as a core operational capability, not a special legal event. When you build it as an operational capability, you can scale it, improve it, and sustain it over time. As a final takeaway, rights requests are where privacy becomes real, because they are direct interactions between the organization and the people whose data is being processed. A program that handles rights requests poorly often has deeper problems, like weak data inventories, unclear retention practices, or inconsistent processes across teams. A program that handles them well usually has strong fundamentals because it can locate data, make consistent decisions, and communicate clearly under deadlines. Clear notices, well-designed processes, and accountable outcomes work together to turn a potentially stressful situation into a predictable, respectful experience. Even if laws and exact rights differ across regions, the operational principles are stable. Verify identity, understand the request, find the data, take the appropriate action, explain what you did, and keep evidence. When you can consistently do those things, you are not just meeting a requirement, you are demonstrating that the organization treats privacy as a real commitment. That is what makes a privacy program credible in the eyes of individuals, leaders, and oversight bodies.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.